Hello and welcome to week number 4 of ACT Reading for Owls. This week, we are going to read a practice passage together. We're going to practice answering 10 questions. I'm going to leave you with a big tip number 2, and I'm going to share with you what week number 5 is going to be like. This practice passage is a literary narrative passage. Remember that there are 4 total different types. This one is a literary narrative or prose fiction, adapted from an essay called Rough Water by David McGlynn. I'm going to screen share the passage and the questions. If you want, you can find a PDF of the passage and the questions using the link in the description below. The practice exam linked below does contain 4 total passages. We're just doing the first one today. We will do the other 3 over the next 3 weeks. I will survey the questions and read this passage out loud. Fast forward this video when I begin reading if you would rather read the passage on your own. And a quick note on timing before we get started. The time that we take to do this together will be longer than you would take for a passage like this on a real ACT, because I'm going to be pausing and explaining items, and that doesn't happen when you take a real ACT. So let's get started. Here's the passage. The first thing that I'm going to do is actually skip down to the questions and do a really brief survey and see what are some things that I can be looking out for as I read. Let's see. The narrator of the passage can best be described as a swimmer who primarily, which of the following events mentioned in the passage happened first chronologically, meaning first one time-wise, not necessarily first in the story. The narrator describes the natatorium as being nearly empty of spectators on the day of the race in order to. The narrator indicates that when he swam the 1,000-yard freestyle in the time trials, the world for a moment seemed to. The passage indicates that during the narrator's swim at the time trial, he understood for the first time that. Based on the passage, the end the narrator mentions in line 80 refers to. The narrator of the passage characterizes the time trial in Houston as. The statement, "That's where you're going now, hurry up," can most directly be attributed to the. For the narrator, compared to practicing in the outdoor pool, practicing in the indoor pool is. And finally, when the narrator heard jump in his mind while swimming, he was most likely remembering. Now that we've surveyed the questions, let's go back into the passage. One of my best races could hardly be called a race at all. I was a senior in high school, gunning to qualify for the USA Junior Nationals. The previous summer, I had missed the cut by less than a second in the mile, and just the day before, at my high school regional meet, I had come within 0.3 of a second in the 500-yard freestyle. The qualification time was 4:39.69. I swam a 4:39.95. The next day, Sunday, I drove with my mother to the far side of Houston where a time trial was being held, an informal, unadvertised event thrown together at the last minute. The only races swum were those the swimmers requested to swim. Most were short, flapping sprints in which swimmers attempted to shave off a few 1/100ths of a second. I didn't have the courage to face the mile, and since I'd struck out in the 500 the day before, I decided to swim the 1,000-yard freestyle, 40 lengths of the pool. It was a race I'd swum fast enough to believe that given the right confluence of circumstances, cold water, and aggressive heat, and energetic meat, I could make the cut. I had 15 seconds to drop to qualify. By the time I stood up on the blocks, I was not only the only one in the race, I was practically the only one in the natatorium. The horn sounded and I dove in. I was angry and disheartened at having missed the cut the day before, and I had little belief that I could go any faster today. About 600 yards in, my coach started to pace. I stayed steady on, not in a hurry, not about to get my hopes up. In my mind, I had already missed the time. Then a boy from a rival high school, whom I hardly knew, unfolded his legs and climbed down from the bleachers and started to cheer. He squatted low to the water and pointed his finger toward the end of the pool as if to say, "That's where you're going, now hurry up." I feel like I've read that before. Maybe that was the subject of a question. I thought, if he's cheering, maybe I'm close. Sometimes a moment comes along when the world slows down, and though everything else moves around us at the same frenetic speed, we're afforded the opportunity to reflect in real time rather than in retrospect. It is as though we slip into a wormhole in the fabric of time and space, travel into the past, and then back again to the present in the same instant. That morning, swimming, I remembered a day in late September the year before, the last day my swim team had use of an outdoor pool. All summer long, my teammates and I swam under an open sky. After this day, we would spend the rest of the season in a dank and moldy indoor pool. The triangular backstroke flags were strung across the lanes and the adjacent diving well. My teammates liked to run down the long cement deck, jump out over the diving well, and try to grab hold of the line. Many of them could jump far enough to make it. I could not, though I tried every day. I tried that day and missed. Since I would not have another shot until May, I decided to try again. I squared up and ran, my feet wet against the pavement, and just as my foot hit the water's edge, one of my teammates called out, "Jump!" I bent my knees and pushed off hard and got my hand around the flag line. I pulled the whole thing into the water. Autumn was coming, and I wondered if there was a metaphor in what I had just done. A fortune folded inside a cookie. My greatest effort would come when I was down to my last opportunity. Now it was March, and I was down to my last opportunity. Thinking about that day and hearing the word jump as my eyes followed the finger of the boy pointing me onward. What I understood, not later, but right then in the water, was how little this swim added up to in the world. I had spent more than a year training for this one swim, and when it was finished, the world would be no different than it before it began. If no one else cared, then the swim was mine alone. It mattered because it was the task before me now, the thing I wanted now. Swimming, I had long understood, is a constant choice between the now and the later. Exhaustion now for the sake of fitness later. All those Friday nights spent in the pool in pursuit of an end that seemed always one step further on. I was out of laters. This was the end, and I made my choice. I cashed in the energy I set aside for climbing out of the pool and unfolding my towel and tying my shoes. I've never sprinted harder in my life, not before and not since. I hit the wall. I knew by instinct, by the spasm of my tendons and the ache in my bones, before I ever turned toward the clock or heard my coach scream, that I had made it. What an inspirational passage. That's fantastic. Now let's move on to the questions. Question number 1. The narrator of the passage can best be described as a swimmer who primarily, is it A, recalls the swim of his life and the factors that motivated him during that swim? B, remembers the events that inspired him to participate in a time trial at the Junior Nationals? C, contrasts the joy of winning competitions early in the season with his later struggle to succeed? Or D, chronicles his swimming career from childhood through high school? If you'd like, pause and take a moment to guess an answer. The best answer for question number 1 is going to be A, recalls the swim of his life and the factors that motivated him during that swim. If you were paying attention during the passage as you read or as you listened, you'll notice that that really fits what he is writing, what he's saying. It's the swim that really matters, and it's ultimately the reasons why he's able to be successful and meet that time that he wants in order to qualify for Junior Nationals. Number 2, which of the following events mentioned in the passage happened first chronologically, meaning which one happened first in time, not necessarily which one happened first in the passage? Is it F, the narrator stood on the blocks at the Sunday time trial his senior year? G, the narrator leapt out over the diving well in late September? H, the narrator swam the 500-yard freestyle in the high school regional meet as a senior? Or J, the narrator heard a boy from a rival school cheering? Take a moment and see if you can't figure out an answer. The best answer for this is G. The narrator leapt out over the diving well in late September. Everything else we see here happens either senior year or on that day that he's talking about, but G talking about this moment that happened further back in time. We can even kind of scroll back up and find that. Yeah, I remember a day in late September the year before, the last day my swim team had use of an outdoor pool. That's going to be the first one that happens chronologically. Number 3, the narrator describes the natatorium as being nearly empty of spectators the day of his race in order to, is it A, illustrate that the perfect racing conditions the narrator had hoped for weren't likely to occur? B, demonstrate that, contrary to the narrator's expectations, the meet was energetic? C, explain why the narrator's coach paced at the sound of the horn? Or D, identify why the narrator felt a rush of energy before the race? Take a moment and see if you can't figure out an answer. The best answer for this is A, illustrate that the perfect racing conditions the narrator had hoped for were not likely to occur. We can scroll back up here and take another look at some of the wording around that, especially right here. I was not only the only one in the race, I was practically the only one in the natatorium. That and the fact that these are races that swimmers can request to swim just to see if they can't hit a certain time. It's informal, unadvertised, thrown together at the last minute. All of that suggests that this really isn't going to be the perfect race. Number 4, the narrator indicates that when he swam the 1,000-yard freestyle in the time trials, the world, for a moment, seemed to, Is it F, speed up, blurring past and present events? G, rush past, forcing him to reflect in retrospect? H, move in slow motion, as did everything around him? Or J, slow down, allowing him to reflect in real time? Take a moment and see if you can't figure out the right answer. All right. As we're trying to figure out an answer for this, I noticed initially that F and G seem to be pretty similar. They both reference speeding up, rushing past, whereas H and J seem to imply that the world kind of slows down, moves in slow motion, slows down. And I do remember reading that in the passage above, and I'll come back up here. Sometimes a moment comes along when the world slows down, and though everything else moves around us at the same frenetic, meaning sort of energetic, quick-paced speed, we are afforded the opportunity to reflect in real time rather than in retrospect. Retrospect means looking back. So after having read that, it seems like number 4 has to be J, slow down, allowing him time to reflect in real time. Because H, move in slow motion, as did everything around him, we know that everything around him didn't move in slow motion too. That's not what it said up above. Number 5. The passage indicates that during the narrator's swim at the time trial, he understood for the first time that A, his goals would always be one step farther on. B, he had trained for this swim for over a year. C, the swim was an event that was important to him alone. Or D, swimming is a choice between the now and the later. Pause for a moment and see if you can't figure out the right answer. The best answer here appears to be C. The swim was an event that was important to him alone. And towards the end of the passage, we're going to see some text that's going to support that. I had spent more than a year training for this one swim, and when it was finished, the world would be no different than before it began. If no one else cared, then the swim was mine alone. It mattered because it was the task before me now, the thing I wanted now. That text is really going to support C as being the best answer. Moving on to question number 6. Based on the passage, the end the narrator mentions in line 80 most likely refers to his, is it F, final pursuit of fitness? G, last chance to qualify for junior nationals? H, memory of his final Friday night practice? Or J, ultimate realization that he had defeated the other competitors in the race? Pause for a moment and see if you can't figure out the right answer. The best answer for number 6 is going to be G, the last chance to qualify for junior nationals. We can go back up to line 80 to take a look. I was out of laters, this was the end, and I made my choice. At the very start of the passage as well, he says, I was a senior in high school gunning to qualify for the USA Junior Nationals. The previous summer, I'd missed the cut by less than a second in the mile, and just the day before, I'd come within 0.3 of a second in the 500-yard freestyle. So it appears like this could be his last chance. This could be the end of the line. Number 7, the narrator of the passage characterizes the time trial in Houston as, is it A, one long sprint in which swimmers attempted to improve their times? B, a meet advertised as a way to qualify for the junior nationals? C, a regional meet that featured only the 500-yard freestyle and 1,000-yard freestyle? Or D, an informal swimming event put together at the last minute? Pause and see if you can't figure out the right answer. All right, so even as you're going through the answers, hopefully you're mentally eliminating some that you just know are not right. For example, we know that it's not C, a regional meet that features only these 2 different freestyles. The correct answer here is D, an informal swimming event that put together at the last minute. And there's some really specific language that we can come back up and reference in order to support that. Right here, lines 10 and 11, an informal, unadvertised event thrown together at the last minute. The only races swum were those the swimmers requested to swim. So 7 is going to be D. Number 8, the statement, that's where you're going, now hurry up, can most directly be attributed to the, is it F, cheering boy as he verbally criticizes the narrator's efforts? G, cheering boy as he shouts encouragement to the narrator? H, narrator as he speculates about what the cheering boy meant when the boy pointed at the pool? Or J, the narrator as he angrily contemplates his response to the cheering boy? Pause and see if you can't find an answer. The best answer for number 8 is going to be H, the narrator, as he speculates about what the cheering boy meant when the boy pointed at the pool. We can come back up and look at lines 35 to 36. Sometimes when it refers to lines, I find it helpful to start actually a line or two before the lines that it's talking about, just so that I can orient myself, so that I have some context. So I might even start up here. A boy from a rival high school, whom I hardly knew, unfolded his legs and climbed down from the bleachers and started to cheer. He squatted low to the water and pointed his finger toward the end of the pool as if to say, "That's where you're going, now hurry up." We also know that the answers are sort of giving us a choice between these two things. It's either the cheering boy or the narrator. So we can immediately look at, can we eliminate F and G if it's not the cheering boy, or can we eliminate H and J if it's not the narrator? We know that the cheering boy doesn't actually say these words, but rather it's the narrator guessing about what the cheering boy is meaning, what the intention behind his pointing is. And that's why H is going to be the best answer. Number 9. For the narrator, compared to practicing in the outdoor pool, practicing in the indoor pool is A, more productive, B, more liberating, C, less appealing, or D, less competitive. Take a moment and see if you can't guess the answer. The best answer here is less appealing, and I actually remember reading that line up here right at the end of, let's see, it looks like lines 47 and 48. All summer long, my teammates and I swam under an open sky. After this day, we would spend the rest of the season in a dank and moldy indoor pool. That sounds disgusting. Definitely not appealing. So C is going to be the best answer there for number 9. And finally, number 10. When the narrator heard jump in his mind while swimming, he was most likely remembering, is it F, his teammates' command the day the narrator caught the flag line? G, his own shout as he leapt off the outdoor pool's deck that fall? H, the cheers of the boy from the rival school? Or J, the abrupt start of his race that Sunday? Take a moment and see if you can't find the answer. All right, the best answer here is F, his teammates' command the day the narrator caught the flag line. There's a good chance that you remember that moment because it was a pretty central part of that memory that the narrator was recounting for us. But we can scroll back up to line 67. Here we go. And I see that jump is mentioned just before that in line 63, it looks like. So we're going to start up there. One of my teammates called out jump. I bent my knees and pushed off hard and got my hand around the flag line. I pulled the whole thing down into the water. Autumn was coming and I wondered if there was a metaphor in what I had just done. Skipping down, now it was March and I was down to my last opportunity thinking about that day and hearing the word jump as my eyes followed the finger of the boy pointing me onward. Going back and again, reading that part of the passage indicates that F is going to be the best answer there for number 10. And that's it. Those are 10 questions. Okay, so here we go. I just finished reading each question aloud and modeling how I would answer it. I did provide an opportunity for you to pause the video and try to find the answer. Here are the answers just in case you missed one. I also have it broken down into the different categories of questions. Remember that there are key ideas and details, craft and structure, and integration of knowledge and ideas. Key ideas and details are the most common type of question, and those are the ones that require really close reading and good reading comprehension. Craft and structure ask you bigger questions or perhaps require you to sort of read in between the lines of the passage that is under consideration. And integration of knowledge and ideas, again, those are pretty few and far between. Those are much deeper questions about the text that you've read. Out of these, numbers 1, 3, and 8 were craft and structure, and all of the rest were key ideas and details. So you might look back and see, were there any is there a pattern maybe in the questions that you found easy or the questions that you found difficult? You might see if you can't identify a little bit of that right now. And here is big tip number 2. Focus on eliminating wrong answers if you're not immediately aware of which answer is right. And I tried to model that as we went through these answers. Be aware of answers that are the opposite of each other also, or that cancel each other out. For example, remember question number 8? Answer choices F and G both started with cheering boy, and H and J both started with narrator. Once you realize that the narrator couldn't actually hear the cheering boy and use the phrase as if to say in reference to the boy's actions, you can eliminate F and G as potential answers. Then you can further eliminate J by realizing that the narrator did not feel anger toward the boy during the race, although he did say he was angry that he had missed the cut the day before. But the narrator was guessing what the cheering boy might have meant. Therefore, H was the correct answer. Don't be afraid to really do this process of elimination in order to find the right answer. It's okay if one answer doesn't jump out immediately as, hey, I'm the right answer. There are some things that you can do, some processes you can really get good at practicing and going through in order to eliminate answers that couldn't possibly be right. And once you've eliminated things that aren't right, what you're left with is going to be the right answer. So for week number 5, the video is going to feature passage number 2 out of that same PDF. This is a social science passage, and it's an excerpt from Apple, A Global History. Again, we will read the passage together and practice answering the questions. There is no need to do anything outside of AI time to prepare for next week. You're going to continue to learn tips, tricks, and strategies for accurately answering questions on the exam. The best thing that you can do to really prepare for the reading ACT is just practice. Do practice questions, read practice passages, figure out if you're doing something wrong, figure out if there's a skill or something that you maybe really need to put some elbow grease into. And remember also that excelling on the reading part of the ACT isn't just going to help you out for the reading part of the ACT, but having good reading comprehension, getting good at identifying craft and structure, and even integrating knowledge and ideas. These are skills that help you out far beyond just the ACT. You can use this anytime that you need to read and be literate. So thank you so much for joining me for week number 4. Hopefully you learned something and had a good time practicing some of these skills, and I'm excited to see you all next week. Thank you.